Hello and welcome to my gardening journey. We've finally reached March and it's meteorological spring, although the weather doesn't seem to know that it should be spring at the moment. It's been a little bit up and down. We've had huge amounts of rain and the garden is absolutely sodden. There's not a lot of work I can do in the garden or down the allotment at the moment because they're waterlogged and it's just impossible to work with. So I'm still in my greenhouse and still trying to make the most of the space I've got to start off some seeds for this year. So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 seeds that you can be sowing in March. That should hopefully give you a really good harvest later on in the year. March here in the UK can be a little bit variable. It can be absolutely stunning and lovely, but it also can snow this time of year. So you have to be careful and protect your seedlings. I'm here in my greenhouse, which needs a bit of a clean, and this would be an ideal space to sow and start your seedlings off. If you haven't got a greenhouse, you can still sow, but you'll probably be more likely to be using your own home and a windowsill. So the warmth from your home will help the germination, and getting as much light onto those seedlings is really important. There's a few things I'm using to aid seed germination this time of the year, and that is a heated propagation bench and heated propagators. And again, you don't need to use these. You can sow in your house and just use your ambient warmth of your house to help with that seed germination. But out here, it does get cold at night, so I need a little bit of extra help. The first seed I'm going to be sowing is some broccoli, which is a brassica. So this will need a fair amount of protection as it grows up because slugs, snails and butterflies will absolutely love this. It is a plant that needs to be harvested as it grows, so it's something that you do need to keep an eye on. But these will be going down my allotment because they can take a lot of space up. I'll be sowing these seeds here in my greenhouse. I've had success doing this before, so I'm happy doing it. But you can also sow these into seed beds outside and then take them up and put them into the proper spacings in the main bed once they've got to the correct size. Broccoli is one of my favourite vegetables to grow. The only challenge with it is that it needs to be harvested as the flower heads start to grow. The problem is if you leave it too long, they will go to flower and then you can't eat them. So timing is really important with these. But they are so satisfying when you get it right. You can get all different types of broccoli, and this one is one that has quite a large head to it, whereas others you can get nice sprouting broccoli where you cut off the smaller heads as they come through. So I'm going to put all of these into a seed tray here into each of the stations. I'll put a couple in for each one to make sure I get some through. So once again, just a small covering of compost over the top of these seeds. Give them a really good water, label and put to one side, and hopefully we should see some germination in the next couple of weeks. Next up will be chive, which is a really nice herb. I like these not just because they're a great herb, but because they also have a lovely flower to them, and I intend to line the paths in my kitchen garden with these plants. You can sow chive outside where they're going to crop, but because it's so wet outside, I'm going to still sow them here in the greenhouse. You can sow these all year round if you're sowing under glass, so it's definitely a really good plant to keep a hold of and keep some seed available. The next 3 seeds that I'll be sowing are ones that ideally should be sown directly into the veg patch where you will be growing them on. Unfortunately, because of the weather at the moment, I just can't get out to do these. So I'm going to try starting a few off here in the greenhouse. I'm sowing the chive here under glass, but once it gets nice and warm outside, I can, if I wanted to, grow this directly into my kitchen garden. I'm going to be sowing them into these trays here that have got these individual seed stations, and I'm going to multi-sow into each of them because I want a nice clump of chives to then put out into the kitchen garden. You don't need to thin them out as they come out. Only do that if really necessary because they're starting to strangle each other, but you should be okay. Chive seeds are fairly small, so you don't need a huge amount of compost on top of them. So just a light covering over top, really good watering, and then label as always so you know what you put in there. Next up is fennel. Now, with fennel you can harvest the stems, the leaves and the seeds. So a really versatile crop. It's also a perennial, so I'm going to see whether I can overwinter these this year. Fennel is another plant that ideally should be sown directly out into the ground, but because of the weather can be so variable here in the east of England during March, I'm going to set my first ones off inside and under glass and then try and transplant them out a bit later on. So with fennel, this is a perennial plant, so it might be something that I can keep growing year on year, but we'll see how that goes. And I'll be multi-sowing them into these trays, much like I have with the other seeds that we've sown today. Fennel seeds are quite large, so they can have a slightly deeper amount of compost over the top of them. And as we've done before, just pop them into this sort of seed tray. Going to multi-sow into each seed station, give them a good water, label, and put them on the side on the heated propagation bench so that they can hopefully germinate in the next week or so. Visited by the chickens. So next up is sorrel, and sorrel is a plant that apparently adds a little bit of extra lemony taste and zing to salads. So a really nice complementary plant to your lettuces and other salads that you're growing. So I'll give this a go and see how well it does sowing under glass. Sorrel is technically a herb, and historically it was used instead of lemons. So before there was lots of lemons here in the UK, this was what was used to try and add a little bit of flavour into things. So we're going to give this a quick go. It's something I haven't sown before, so it'll be interesting to see how well it goes. What I'll be doing is sowing into a pot, and I'll just be covering the surface of the pot with the seeds, and as they germinate I'll then separate them out into their own pots and then eventually out into the veg patch. So the seed packet comes with 50 seeds, which I don't think I really need, so I'm going to try and save a few of those. They are pretty small seeds. I'm not sure you can see those, but very small seeds, so not going to need a huge amount of cover once we've sown them. And like I said, just sprinkle them across the top. These are perennials as well, so they may keep over winter. We shall see how well they do. And usually with seeds, you just need to cover them with compost that's around about the same amount as the seed itself, so not a huge amount over these. As always, give it a really good watering. So I'm going to pop these into my heated propagator and I'll put a label on it, and hopefully in the next week or so I'll start to see some germination. Next up is Kohlrabi, which can be sown outside this time of year or indoors. It's of the brassica family, so I suspect I'm going to have to protect it from caterpillars, slugs and snails. So we'll see how well I do with this. Kohlrabi tends to do pretty well when you're sowing directly outside, so that's what I want to try and do for most of the year, but the garden has been really waterlogged, so I'm going to start a few off inside. I've never sown this before, so it'll be really interesting to see how well it goes. It's not a vegetable you tend to see too often in the supermarket, so it's something that's really interesting to produce yourself and try out. From what I read, this is a vegetable that you want to harvest when it's young. It's when it tastes the best and you can eat it raw. Tend to grate it down, put it into coleslaws or into salad. Because I'll be harvesting young, it means I'll likely need to do multiple sowings throughout the year just to keep a supply going. So I'll start some off now and then I'll be sowing them into the garden later on. So this seed packet comes with, I think it's 500 seeds, so plenty of seeds in there. I'm just going to put a couple into each of the seed stations just to make sure I get at least one good seedling coming through in each station. I just cover these over with a small amount of compost and then give it a really good water. As always, make sure you label these. These will go onto my heated propagation bench, and hopefully in about a week to 2 weeks, we should start to see some life come through. Before I finish, I just want to give you a few more seeds that you can sow in March here in the UK, or if you're in a similar climate to us. Starting off with some sweet corn. Sweet corn is a really, really good vegetable to grow. It's a heavy cropper. It does need a little bit of space to grow, so an allotment is ideal for this. And I'll sow these under glass here in some seed trays and take them down the allotment once they get to around about pencil size. So that's definitely something you can start growing now. Next up is courgette, also known as zucchini, another plant that is a really, really good cropping plant, so worth giving a go. I tend to eat these when they're a lot smaller and when they're, I think, baby courgettes as they call them, and I sow them in seed trays into the greenhouse and I'll take them out later on once they grow up. Finally, I'll be sowing some parsnip, and these will be sown directly into the ground down my allotment, so rather than here under glass. These take a little bit of time to mature, so these will probably be winter crops that I'll harvest much later in the year, and I'll be sowing them into rows and around about 20 centimetres apart. So hopefully these will do really well down the allotment. So that's it for this video. If you're sowing your own seeds this time of the year, please drop some comments down into the comment section to let other people know what they can be sowing as well. I'm still learning, so if you've got any thoughts and advice that we can share with other people, please again put that down into the comments. It just helps everyone out. If you've liked this video, please like and subscribe it. It really does help it out and get this shown to other people, and I'll see you next time.